welcome to the first ever, the inaugural episode of well, I don't really have a name for the podcast yet, but in keeping with my tradition of going off the cuff and just doing whatever the hell I want, we're going to proceed forward. My name is William Hurst. I am coming to you live, well, not really live, but it's live for me, from the great frigid north of Wisconsin, where the brats are good, the curds are juicy, the beer flows, and the pre-modern never stops. And today, we are joined by my first ever guest, a person I actually credit with being the second person to really put me on game about pre-modern, especially on the online space. We are with Cyberpunker today. Cyber, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself how you wish and say what's up.
Well, thanks, Will. What's up, guys? I'm Cyberpunker, and me and Will have played online several times with Premodern.
Absolutely. And where Cyberpunker's space is, not that he doesn't do IRL, because I know you do, but is the Magic... Is it the Magic Online series? I can never remember the MOS.
Yes, like Magic Online Society.
There we go, Society. I always get it wrong, and I feel like an idiot. But it's probably your premier place to go, would you say, to play Premodern through Magic Online itself?
Yes, that is correct. Basically, most of my games with Premodern, unless it's a real life event, have been on Magic Online. I've been trying to get back into the monthlies. I think, two when I was on vacation abroad, but I couldn't bring all my cards, so I couldn't update my deck with the monthlies. But yeah, this monthly, I'm in, so we'll see.
I love it. How are you doing in this monthly so far?
So far 1-0, but yeah,
there you
so
go.
far 1-0.
Absolutely. I'm managing to be 2-1,
Nice.
So we're gonna try and get back on my hot streak if I can. But going forward, the reason Cyber is on today is we all know Premodern has nostalgia. We all know it has classic mechanics that we all love, and one of those is Madness. And if you are looking for the name, in my opinion, for Madness within the Premodern space, especially Survival Madness, you're looking at Cyberpunker. This man, I don't know about in real life, but online, every result you will ever see, it's Blue-Green Madness, Blue-Green Madness, Blue-Green Madness. And there's a great progression that we're going to look at today of the development of this archetype. An archetype, in my opinion, that currently right now has a lot of really good matchups against the top deck because it does things in such an efficient way, but out of the normal sequence of how things are supposed to be happening. So why don't we start, Cyber, with why did you pick up Blue-Green Madness, and what has made you devote yourself to the idea of tuning this deck to where it is now?
Okay, I guess to answer the first part of your question, why did I pick up Blue-Green Madness? I think because, okay, so let's go back. When I started playing Magic, it was during I got into Magic in 7th edition when me and my friends were just kind of playing after school around when I was in middle school. Then though, I got really competitive during Onslaught block. So this was during the time where Type 2, there was Blue-Green Madness, there was Tog, Goblins, and everything. Blue-Green Madness was my deck back in the day, and so it was one of the decks that I really that really laid the foundation of how I played Magic in general. I played it throughout the extended season after the standard season was over, and I still played the same deck. Did pretty well locally in my LGSs, and when Blue-Green Madness eventually rotated out of standard and extended, I played it in Legacy, and I think Pre-Modern is kind of an amalgamation of old Legacy, extended, and Type 2, and back then, Madness was really, really strong, and right now, I think right now, Pre-Modern, it's not as strong as Legacy was, but it is kind of close to that level, and by like around like 2006 legacy ish, and I think I guess the thing about Madness is in the pre-modern era, um, the ability to flash creatures in and gain value is really unique to Madness. And keep in mind these are big creatures like 4/4s or potential 3/3s. They're not like like 1/1 flyings and stuff. So that is like a fundamental premise that I think I think Madness has an advantage over every other strategy in the field. It like the ability just to like end of turn flashing creatures, end of turn make stuff happen, and while at the same time keeping up counter magic and potentially you know choosing between controlling the board or aggroing the opponents out. Um, so that's why like so I guess that's how I played Madness in the beginning. But the second part is that's why I keep developing it. I think with survival, the Madness mechanic and the Madness strategy is really good. And like I said, I think the Madness has the ability to flash in the creatures like that end of your turn, and big creatures, mind you. I think that has the potential to break the format, or at least become number one or tier one in the format with like the right development.
Absolutely. And I love all those points. And as I look at the list, and you had mentioned kind of an amalgamation of legacy and standard and extended from back in the day, was, and I don't have a big familiarity with legacy, was survival of the fittest legal within legacy to do the same strategy? Because I had always thought they had banned survival relatively quickly within the legacy sphere. Maybe I'm wrong though.
Oh well, they banned survival because Madness was getting way out of hand. Um,
Was it the madness
it
problem?
was. It
Okay.
was. Well, basically, I played during the 2003 to 2010 era Legacy, and before the printing of before the printing of Vengevine, um, Blue Green Madness was always a strategy in Legacy. Um, ironically, like you see a lot of similar decks or similar builds in pre-modern for Madness as he did in Legacy, from Roar of the Worm to like LED builds, um, and survival. The addition I knew back in the day that survival was really good in Madness. I basically due to financial constraints, I could never own a playset of survival until I like started working. So like as a result, like I knew I could have done a little bit better than I did when I was playing Madness and Legacy. But that being said, I knew that survive when I eventually got survival, I did very well. And I mean, if you look at the archive results, you'll see that there were around 2008ish, that era of Legacy, Madness with survival was already starting to win tournaments. And when they printed Vengevine, that's when like it just became tier one. Like it was dominating the field, and like I think the last draw was I think at Gen Con at one year. I think in '09 or '09 I think around that. I think the top like eight was mostly Madness, and then I think that's the same year. I think Madness won. If my memory's kind of like it was a while ago, but I think Madness won Gen Con and was most of the top eight or something, and then like Wizards are like,
Awesome.
yeah, like from Madness is Survival's banned, but not because the Survival was broken in and of itself. I think
Hmm.
I've always known that it had the potential to break Legacy. It's just that that potential was fully realized with Vengevine, and so Survival of the Fittest had to die for Vengevine's sins.
Yeah, Vengevine is a card that did a lot of things in a lot of places, but certainly survival, as anyone who has played at least even this format knows, or with it at all, is something that is insanely broken because of what it does and how efficiently it does it. So with that being said, kind of let's jump into our beginning of the timeline here within the Magic Online Society. A lot of these decks, if you look up Cyberpunker on TC Decks, you'll find a lot of these decks, this timeline. That was my source. Shout out to them for keeping great deck lists, great archives of these things. It's really helpful, especially when putting together a podcast like this. So the first look we have is, this is from back in September of 2021. So is this about the time that Magic Online Society started to, at least in pre-modern, start doing its thing? Is this kind of the beginning of the road? Because I have a feeling you were a early adopter within that.
Yeah,
okay. So
oh
go
no,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, like, I was just gonna confirm what you said. Like, this is around the time when the pre-modern started growing on the Magic Online community. Like, the Magic Online Society is and was founded as kind of like a online LGS, and it really exploded during COVID. But it was always the official it was always the official formats, and I think they started like doing casually pre-modern, and I joined because that was when I got back into Magic and got back into pre-modern, and like someone recommended pre-modern to me, and I couldn't find any. I didn't have like a webcam set up for any of the webcam tournaments, so this is the only way I started playing pre-modern, and this was when people started to started play pre-modern on Magic Online, and like around like this time, we was when the Magic Online Society started like growing with pre-modern. We had people from like Sol Malka to like Paul Master. I think I mean, you've obviously played a little bit, and your friend Brian Colwell. I think I talked with him and told him to join, but he started playing Magic Online too, but he never joined our leagues. But yeah, this was around that time.
Yeah. Absolutely. BK, to my understanding, is just not a huge fan of how Magic Online works.
Understandable.
He's not a huge fan of it, at least from the brief conversations I've had. But it's an excellent resource, and in many ways, even a cheaper way of discovering pre-modern, especially with the various loan programs. Whereas in real life, if you want to play Parfait and you want to play with your Moxes, you're dropping $400 or $500 on Moxes for beat up ones. Whereas on Magic Online, you can get Moxes for 25-ish, 20, 25. So it is a great resource for those who want to jump into the format, play essentially whatever top tier deck you want at a relatively low price. So I recommend anybody who would like to do that, try it. And before we actually jump into the deck, I forgot a very important question. What truly brought you into the pre-modern space? You had experience in standard and extended and legacy. Did those become stale? Was it not what you were looking for? Were you looking for a less competitive outlet? I mean, what brought you to this particular space?
Okay. For me, it wasn't that other formats were becoming like full disclosure, I haven't played standard or extended. I mean, don't even have extended anymore. But
we don't.
But I haven't played any of the non-rotating formats since Madness rotated out. So I've always I've always been I've migrated into Legacy. I actually play Vintage too, and when I got back into Magic in around 2021, people introduced me to Modern and Pauper, but then like someone introduced me to Pre-Modern. I was just on like a game. I came back and I had no idea like what was going on. Someone had to explain Magic Online to me, and like I came back using Cockatrice. And I came back using Cockatrice. I still have Magic Workstation installed on my computer.
I used to use Magic Workstation all the
Me too.
time.
Same here. That was how I got my testing done.
Yeah.
But no, right before I quit was when Cockatrice came out and I started using it, I came back to
Mm-hmm.
cockatrice, and I found like a
Okay.
game called Premodern. I'm like, what is that? I joined, and that guy's
Uh
like,
huh.
hey, check this website out. I checked. I'm like, whoa, like this is like old magic. This is like classic magic for me at least. For me,
Uh huh.
yeah. And so I'm
Absolutely.
like, okay, like I'm gonna do it. And I looked it up, and I liked it because it seems like there's actually a scene going on. Like, because there's other like I got introduced to old 93, 94, which is I mean I'm part of a play group that's great, but it felt too casual. Um, Pre-modern, I think the founders' idea was to make it competitive and to be like an actual serious format, and the players here are like serious, but then like um, but the players here are just more. Well, with any other format, you have like a lot of players, and with all players, you have a wide array of personalities. The pre-modern group tends to be more of like a more. I don't hate to use this word, but mature, like normal people, and like and also everyone's part of a Discord, and so if you're not cool, you get ostracized pretty quickly. So like I mean, there's checks and
Yeah.
balances to
Yeah.
the community. So and, my point is, it was a good community, and it was a competitive community. People wanted to play, but and it was a serious format, and it was really a developing format, and plus I knew the format well. Like I looked at all the lists. I'm like I could do pretty well in this format. Like this is like a when I came back, Pioneer was completely new. Modern was completely new. I never touched any of those formats. Popper, um, like with pre-modern, I'm like, yeah, I know this format. I could play in this format, and it was like I said, it was competitive. It was the players are great, and the format's growing, and you know that's what draw me to pre-modern. It was became one of the formats I think like yeah, this is a good format to invest playtime in.
Absolutely. And I would echo your same sentiments on my end as well. So we have now entered the pre-minor space. You have discovered that the love of your magic life, Blue Green Madness with survival, is alive and
Yeah.
kicking. And not only that, even if you want to get back and you get into it cheaper because you have gold bordered survivals, you don't have to spend all the money
Yeah.
on it. So we're going to look at your first list here. And I'm going to kind of go down the list. We'll kind of talk about some things that pop out, things that are regular, everyone will typically know. So, as we're looking at this list from September, you have a Genesis and a Wonder, only three Arrogant Worms, four Basking Rootwalla, four Squee Goblin Naboob. That's one that I've seen varying, so we'll love to talk about that. Four Wild Mongrel as your creature set. Your instance contained two Intuitions, three Counterspell, 3 days, four Accumulated Knowledge. You had four Careful Studies, four Survivals, and then your land suite was a typical 8-7 split on the four 8 islands, 7 forests, the four coasts as always, and you chose to opt into four wastelands. As far as the main decks, the things that pop out to me, um, why initially have madness lists always just initially been like three arrogant worms? Has it never usually been a full play set in lists?
Well, to answer, well, most Type Two Odyssey block and extended Madness lists run run 3 to 4. So Odyssey block people are running like 3 to 4, three mostly, and Onslaught. Oh, sorry, with Type Two, most of them I think four became the standard, and so did extended. And towards the end, like, once we hit Legacy though, Arrogant Worm became easily like a three of sometimes instead of a four of. But so yeah, like 3 to 4 is pretty. Even back then, like three is still acceptable. You most lists run four, but you could cut down to three, and still be very
Sure.
competitive.
Gotcha. And then the four Squee Goblin
Yes.
Boobs. Is that truly, is that just maximizing your ability to chain, threats? Is that truly what it is? Because if you're looking at the list, you have no way to actually generate red mana, so they are never ever making it anywhere into play. So it's purely a card advantage engine that you're maxing out. Is that the day with it?
Yeah, well,
Okay, awesome.
yeah. Let me explain the Force Squeeze.
I
Yeah,
want to hear
so
it.
pre-modern, they, I think his name is Martin Berlin. He made the conscious decision to ban Brainstorm. And if you look at all the lists prior to here, Blue Green Madness, besides in like Type 2, and um, they've only mainly relied on Brainstorm. Brainstorm has been a staple
Okay.
of Madness since forever. Um, if you ban Brainstorm, number one, you make decks just way less consistent in general. You make mana bases way less
Mm-hmm.
consistent, and you make Madness. The next best thing after Brainstorm is Careful Study, and when I got into pre-modern, I realized that like pre-modern has the potential to um, have powerful effects like modern, but you need to make it happen. So I thought, you know what? Careful study. I want it to be like a thought cast. I don't want it to be like a careful study. And and
Mm-hmm.
wild mongrel. I want it to be like a tarmogoyf. I don't want it just to be like a wild mongrel. Um, and I realized that
Right. You want it to be a true threat attacking in every
exactly.
turn, so those squeeze maximize the amount of free
Yes.
pumps that you get without having to try and turn it into I'm dumping this just to get an arrogant worm into play. It's purely I'm dumping this so I can attack you aggressively.
Exactly. Squeeze enable the engine. I would later add a frantic surge but then like careful study becomes thoughtcast. Survival becomes
Hmm.
card advantage, and a tutor. Survival becomes a card advantage engine and a tutor every single turn. Um, and Wild Mongrel can potentially become a pre-modern Tarmogoyf. Basically, just having it untapped will like basically hold back faster aggro, and or just having like Wild Mongrel just be really tall. It could attack into it could become a 3/3, a 4/4, 5/5 even. Technically a 6/6. Like it could like it makes Wild Mongrel just so much better. Squeeze synergize with Force Squeeze will synergize with this kind of build. I think at this power level, like at pre-modern's power level, you need to be abusing Squeeze.
Absolutely. And then as we move into our instance, nothing else in that initial creature list really pops out. Um, so my experience with Madness really comes down to I just never feel like I get the mana base right. And I hear that a lot. So when I would play, I'm going to mention Counterspell. We all know Counterspell is a powerful card. But at some point when I start playing, I would consider it like, I really wish this was just manually because sometimes that double blue just felt so
Right.
awkward at the points where you wanted to use it. Did you ever feel that way, or was Counterspell always this is the spell, even sometimes when it sucks, it has to be Counterspell?
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people, and I do understand where they're coming from because, but that being said, if you look at old Type 2 lists, they ran Counterspell as well. And if you
Hmm.
look at old extended lists, I mean, obviously block lists, they didn't have Counterspell, but like if you Type 2 and extended lists, they tend to run Counterspell as well, and they actually had worse mana than we do in pre-modern. And so
Okay.
because I played that during that era, and during Legacy, Legacy they had better mana, better Counterspells, but um, I know that blue is doable, and and in this list, I kept it down to 3 counterspells main, with the option to board into the fourth. But then,
Hmm.
um, in my experience, you usually do get blue. And this is especially so because you run draw spells. If you didn't run
Hmm.
draw spells, that would be a big problem. Yeah, but you run stuff like careful study, and in this build, I was running the AK engine, so you do
Yep.
you will get your blue when you need it usually, and yeah, like there will be times in which you don't have blue, um, but those times in my experience have been less so than the times when like your counterspell would be have been better than either mana leak because they do have the mana, or it would have been better than prohibit or negate, or like, or not negate, but like prohibit and like just any other like counterspell that would have replaced it. I Because to answer more of a question, I tried mana leak out in my initial build instead of counterspell, and it did it like, against decks like Landstill, against decks like against slower grindier decks like the Rock, um, like any deck with like Birds of Paradise, they will eventually have the 3 mana to play around the mana leak, and and I even like someone got even like paid for it with a Dark Ritual and stuff like. I was playing on this Doom. I was playing Premodern Doomsday. I mean, I still won because I had double mana leak, but like
There you
yeah,
go.
but I wanted to spite mana leak like letting me down. Like yeah,
Yeah, I
like
get it.
I think in Madness you really want to like stop the threat, and you really need counterspell or a hard counter against decks like Landstill, against slower decks that will want to grind you out or try to.
Okay, awesome, awesome. And then you mentioned the AK package, and for those not familiar, accumulated knowledge, a card. 2 mana, 1 blue, 1 colorless. Cast it instant. Draw a card equal to the number of um, accumulated knowledge is in the graveyard. So if there's 1 in the graveyard and you cast another one, you get 2, then 3, etc. And that package typically runs the 4 AKs plus, in this case, 2 intuitions, which you can go grab 3 cards. Your opponent picks 1. You get that when they go in their graveyard. So you're setting up your own, essentially, ancestral recall with that. Additionally, you can see options where maybe you even go get 4, you get 3 squeeze, and you just start beating people's butts in with wild mongrel all over the
Exactly.
place. So intuition, when you were playing this build initially, did it feel like an auto will include? Did it feel too powerful not to
Um,
run at the time?
well, I was when I was building this version, I had in the back of my mind Legacy Madness as well as Extended Madness, a little bit of Type Two. I realized that you need like more draw spells besides Careful Study, and in order to like
Yep.
replace the loss of Brainstorm, you like you needed more spells to go deep. My first thought in this build was the AK engine. I thought AK, I mean, the first one is an easy discard to Wild Mongrel, and every AK after the first would be is profit. And yeah, and like you said, you could intuition for like 3 squeeze, or you could intuition like that too. So my initial thought behind this was I wanted Madness to play like a tempo deck or an aggro control deck, and it needs to be able to keep up with grindy decks like the Rock or Landstill. Like those or those 2 decks were in the back of my mind as I initially designed Madness.
Awesome, awesome. And then we see Dazes as another counterspell, not an uncommon choice. I don't think we have to much talk about that. It's just it's a very great tempo play early. Something people, even if they see it once, they have to be aware of it the rest of the match. For survivals, not even close to needing to talk about. They're an engine. We get it. Wastelands. Let's talk about Wasteland for a second. How did you find Wasteland initially in these versions? Was it something that really pushed you ahead in matchups? Was it mediocre? Where did you land on it after you played this initial version?
Well, okay. For me, wastelands were always an auto include. Even during
Mm-hmm.
extended and legacy. Well, for one, legacy era Madness. Well, legacy's in a whole different other format because there's dual lands, so that's why it was an auto
Right.
include for wastelands. But even in extended, I mean, people wouldn't normally run wastelands, but then I realized there was something in pre-modern that I realized. Pre-modern is a format where you can easily get color screwed. Um, this is like look at decks like Dead Guy Ale or any deck 3 color deck like Patriot or the Solution. You can easily get color screwed. Um, and the way Madness works with days, and the thing is, this goes back to what I said about flashing in creatures. Like Madness has the ability to explode out with, let's say, like a careful study with Basking Rootwalla, or or end of turn like Arrogant Worm, or end of turn Survival. Like you are doing things like you are exploding in creatures with the addition of stuff like Days and Wasteland. You it offers you the ability to keep the opponent off balance long enough for your guys to get to get through and end the game. Wastelands, I've really liked it every time in all my matchups. For example, against Landstill, it's great against their man lands. Against the Rock opposing color decks, it could stop it could keep them off black mana. Um, Dead Guy Ale, Wastelands were. I mean, Dead Guy Ale is a great matchup regardless, but Wastelands just completely wrecks them. Um, I mean, in my experience, especially so in pre-modern, you will win games off of the off of Wasteland alone. Like you will steal games that might have been competitive. You might have lost, but Wasteland alone would steal you enough games that you know that you might it will make a difference. Yeah, you will win games off Wasteland alone.
Absolutely. That sounds reasonable to me, and I can never turn down a good wasteland personally. So, as we look at the sideboard, probably pretty typical for the time. For chill, I'm assuming if this is kind of more the beginning of
Yeah.
online, one of the easiest decks to put together is Sly or Goblins. Not unusual there, even though I think Madness just runs over Sly most of the time in general. In my opinion, my experience, you got three naturalizes, three Tormod scripts, three waterfront bouncers, which is probably the thing that stands out the most. One counterspell, one daze to complete the counterspell suite. Waterfront bouncer, was that just your best effective way of getting rid of things like just problematic permanents while also improving your game plan? Was that probably just the best way to describe the reasoning for
Yeah.
those?
So this is keep in mind like this was right when I got into pre-modern, like in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
This was like kind of my first iteration, and I remember back in the day there were several decks that Madness had problems with. One of them was Oath of Druids with Phantom Neshoba and
Mm-hmm.
Cognivore. I remember, and another deck was Reanimator, which turned out to be a kind of a non-issue, but maybe. The third is I was thinking of the Madness Mirror. Um, I
Uh-huh.
remember the Madness Mirror back in the day. It was whoever resolves the waterfront bouncer first, or whoever had the survival first would win the game.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't so sure about the meta yet, so I just included the three waterfront bouncers in case I do run into problems with any version of Oath or any version of Reanimator, or if someone wants to play the Madness Mirror against me, waterfront bouncers would have owned them.
Absolutely. And I love Waterfront Bouncer. I've lost to that card many times, and I still love it. So that kind of rounds out our first list that you put together. What, before we move on to some next iterations, were the things you found worked really well with it, the things you were maybe wrong about, maybe your assumptions or what you put together that led you in different
Yeah.
directions?
So number one, I started with 4 chills because that's just like the standard thing to do back in extended was chill. I realized very quickly. that chill was not as way too slow, sometimes even irrelevant, versus goblins and sly. You needed four hydroblasts or four blasts in general, to deal with them, because your how madness wins against goblins or sly is you gotta defend first, and then after like you've stabilized, you then turn the tables on them. Um, so blue elemental blast is what you actually needed to stop them, and then to be able to turn the tables. Naturalize was right. You needed four of those effects. I was right with bouncer, but I had to go down. I had to cut some of it for other slots, which we'll talk about later. And crypt. I honestly couldn't. Uh, I honestly couldn't find a lot of matchups where crypt was that relevant, and in the matchups where it was relevant, I think like stuff like bouncer or naturalize and stuff like that would have done the trick also. Without like decks like World Gorger Dragon and Reanimator, stuff like that, uh, you typically don't, as madness, you typically don't need to hate. You can get away with not hating the graveyard.
Absolutely. And then the things that come out of the graveyard, there's ways to deal with them that isn't just Tormod's Crypt. I've felt that same way, and I think when I first got into pre-modern, and I assume you did as well, and a lot of people coming in, is that there are a lot of memories of Reanimator and what it used to be able to do. But I don't know if Reanimator ever really existed in spaces where Swords to Plowshare was legal, things of that nature, for long periods of time. So, yeah, Tormod's Crypt, obviously a great card, but I think I agree with you that it's one of those things where everyone assumes it's going to be better than it
Yeah,
is in a lot
yeah.
of
Like
cases.
it never does hurt to have graveyard hate if you have the slots for it. But
Correct.
if you don't, uh, with a little bit of brain power, you could overcome the lack of graveyard hate. I think, at least with madness.
Ab-
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, so we are going to move on to our next list. So this is just coming a couple months later in November of the same year. Very similar lists. Land bases hasn't changed. The creature base changed a tiny bit. Some instance change. So we'll kind of go through that. The changes mainly were to the creatures. You didn't remove any creatures to my knowledge, but you added two Aquamobias. And then your instance out went the counter spells in the main. Out went the intuitions. You went up to 4 days main, and you went into two
Yeah.
frantic searches. Why don't we talk about frantic search and what led you down that path? And then, everyone likes to talk about a little Aquamobia too. So let's
For
talk about
sure.
that.
All right. So I realized quickly, after I started playing more pre-modern, that the AK engine was simply too slow. Um, uh, it was if you ever had it got it going, it was great. But with madness, typically around turn three, you need to explode out. Um, you need to either be able to hold them back long enough to stabilize and then go, or by turn three you have to explode. And you I want, but at the same time I still needed more consistency in my draw engines. You need careful study is always great. And I realized, okay, so this format has frantic search. I've never really tried frantic search in Madness, because there was always never a factor, with like stuff like brainstorm and stuff. But I realized I could probably make use of frantic search, so I started testing it. Um, Frantic search ended up becoming way more powerful than I thought it would have been, and it enables going back to what I said about flashing in creatures in the pre-modern era being really good. End of turn frantic search, paying, untapping three lands, discarding arrogant worm, paying for the arrogant worm. End of turn, or during combat before blockers. In that's those are the kind of plays that no other deck in the pre-modern era or in the pre-modern scene can really do. Like no one can flash in a 4/4 end of your turn or during blockers and gain card advantage. You know, so Frantic Search was I realized it was just a no-brainer. And going back to the decks like that was on the back of my mind always when I was building Goblin, Sly, Landstill, the Rock. Um, Frantic Search is really good against number one Landstill. With four Frantic Searches, four Careful Studies, I was able to actually draw more cards than Landstill. like this Tempo or aggro control deck being more of a having a better card advantage engine than the control deck. Um, Against the Rock, they simply just couldn't keep up. Well, they could if they got me in the beginning with their discard or their, but like even if they deeded like a few like once or twice even, uh, the the engine with the squeeze, the card advantage engine based on the squeeze was was really good. Against decks like goblins, being able to hold up, being able to flash an arrogant worms at the right moment was good still, and yeah, all in all, the AK engine, the Intuition AK engine was just too slow, and Frantic Search was fast enough to replace it, and ended up providing more power.
All right, that sounds all logical to me. And as you look at more of the list, nothing else really changed. The Aquamobile, was that a? Did you just need a different discard outlet? Did it provide a much more flexible attacker blocker as you learned the format more? Like it blocks a lackey and then attacks really well if it needs to, or things like that. Or it blocks a jackal pup for that matter. How
Yeah,
about that? And it doesn't
exactly.
die.
Like as I've started playing more, I wanted more. Number one, I wanted more ways to hold back faster aggro like Sly and Goblins, and
Yep.
I guess White Weenie, or Mono Black aggro. I mean, Mono Black's an easy match regardless, but it was Aquamoebas were just. I mean, they were always a card in Madness up to even Legacy
Yep.
Madness. It was still always a card. It was always an
Yes, it was.
okay card. You were never like, yes, I have Aquamoeba. It's more like, okay, I have Aquamoeba, and it functions as extra mongrels. It functions as mongrels 5 and 6. It's a discard outlet.
Right.
It holds back aggro, and if need be, if you discard one card to it, it beats like a mongrel, effectively. Uh, so it is mongrels 5 and 6. That's the main function of Aquamoeba. The inclusion of Aquamoeba was to hold back the aggro decks while you stabilize, and to function as as an extra beater, and obviously more importantly a discard outlet. It was just there just to enable those turn three arrogant worms, enable you to make use of your squeeze. It was and enable to you to kind of block. It was kind of like that okay card that fills that space in the deck, and that does its job well enough to warrant an inclusion.
Absolutely. And some of its power obviously went away with using the
Yeah,
new rules and not damage on the stack. But, so many cards are like that as well. So as we look further into it, nothing really changed in the main deck. The mana base was the same. Those were the major changes. In the sideboard, the naturalizers were there. The three crypts were there still. You were down to two waterfront bouncers. You had moved the counter spells to the sideboard, three of them, and then you were still on four chill. Was this still a period of time where I didn't play this early, but was aggro and kind of mid range still king, and the prison decks like Parfait wasn't even really developing? Was this just a different time in
yeah,
pre-modern?
like this was before Parfait got really good with like Oath of Druids in Parfait. This was when
Yep, yep.
everyone was playing like the Rock, Sly, Goblins, Landstill, and Mono.
They were
Yeah,
playing fair
or
decks.
Mono Black aggro. Dead Guy Ale. People were still like this was before Stifle Knot or Parfait really you know wham,
So this truly was a reiteration of a lot of classic extended
yeah,
decks. This was that because every deck you just mentioned was an extended
yeah,
deck, sometimes even
yeah,
in Legacy. But those are like the staple fair
yeah,
decks, I would say. So definitely the counter spells moving to the side was like you're not seeing beyond maybe some land sale. There's no like really prisony control-y decks. Counterspell maybe a little bit too slow in some game ones, not always necessary, and you just bring them in more in matchups as you needed them.
right, right. So
Okay.
that was yeah, like basically, I started seeing right now. I started seeing more a lot of the rock, like and combo just wasn't there. I mean, I saw greater combo in Draco Blast, but they weren't really they were kind of inconsistent. So,
Sure.
so um, the decks that were running wild, and this was also the time when Sol Malka was playing, and he was always playing uh, um, his version of the rock, which
The
well,
king of
yeah,
the
but
rock.
see, his rock has survival, and yeah, like it doesn't have
Ah,
deed. Like honestly think rock could be like really tier one if someone started putting survival. I mean, that's a tangent to all this, but yeah, like anyway, there were a lot
sure.
of good mid-range decks. There were a lot of good aggro decks, fair decks, and I knew based on my own experience that with survival and a better draw engine, Madness would and has the potential to run over any other fair deck it comes across. Like so,
A hundred
yeah,
percent. And were you finding that as we've talked about this iteration, once you made those changes, were you finding your success rate
yeah,
increasing, becoming more streamlined with the frantic search, in some cases even better with the card draw, less clunky? It gives you more time to get to your game plan faster and more effectively. Was it a good step in the right
yeah,
direction?
yeah. It was. Every single time. One of the best things about pre-modern is it's the non-changing nature of the format, and I think brings us ever closer to finding optimal builds of decks. And so, yeah,
Absolutely.
with more time, with more plays, with more experience, with more play testing, especially in tournaments, I felt like I was always I am still currently like developing towards that, like improving upon this deck to the point where I could see it, where I could confidently say, yes, it is a tier one deck, and I'll prove the concept.
Absolutely. And that's what I love to see. I love the development of it. So as we push forward to our next deck, our next iteration. All right, so we notice in this build, there's some big changes, mostly sideboard, that we're going to kind of get to. So we are now in January of the year 2022. This is actually a in-person
Yeah,
event. Um, are you comfortable saying out in
yeah, yeah.
California? I mean,
This
yeah,
was
fair enough.
in,
Local
well
LGS or
so there was no pre-modern scene. There was no pre-modern scene back in the day. I mean, around this time still. Like this was like we literally just had one pre-modern tournament this year.
mm-hmm.
This was so I started messaging people like on Facebooks and on Discord saying, hey, who's in Southern California? Like let's get together to play some pre-modern. And like guys like Michael Arnold or like Fred Fury,
Yup.
they reached out and said, "Hey, we're all interested." So I was actually the TO. I ended up becoming the tournament organizer,
Okay.
and I started like getting everyone to show up. And yeah, so this was actually like my own tournament, and I yeah
Awesome. Awesome. So here are some changes, and this is where it starts getting. This is what I start love looking at. So most of our creature base is the same. That has not changed. Our instants really haven't changed, except that 3 counter spells are now back in the main deck. And what were they replacing from the previous one?
um
I think it was. What do what did they replace?
So like, well, let me just explain. Well, I guess right now, I I this was the time when I added Hailstorm on the board. Yeah,
Yes, and that was what I was
yeah,
gonna get to with the board was a lot of the changes. So main deck counterspells basically came back in. You added a City of Brass. Talk to me about the
yeah.
City of Brass.
This goes back to your point and everyone's point about the mana. I did started noticing. Okay, number one, you might have noticed I went from like 23 lands to 22, 21 lands. Um,
Okay, that's where the
yeah,
extra came. That I got it
yeah.
now. We're good.
So number I went down because I realized I was flooding too much. I realized that like
Hmm.
Madness really doesn't need that many lands because of all the cantrips, like Careful Study, Frantic Search. It doesn't really need a lot of lands. 21, I think, is an optimal number. Um, and I realized that against grindier decks, you don't want to be top decking lands. You want to be top decking the threats. Going down to 21, I went down to 22 first, and then 21, and realized 21. At 21 lands, my win rate started going up again, and I realized that so 20. I
Okay.
stuck with 21. City of Brass. I realized that I needed another dual land because yeah, like it got to the I did it like the fact that the thing about pre-modern, like I said, is it is a format that you can easily get color screwed, and I just
Yes.
realized that like I needed one more Yavi Maya, and so and this was after like
Hmm.
a lot of testing. Like I realized I needed one more Yavi Maya, and that's so I cut a forest for a Yavi for a City of Brass because I just needed. I actually not it's not green that I needed. I realized I needed more blue. So
Hmm.
in came the City of Brass, and there's with an added benefit that if I could technically cast a squee now if I
Yes, you
technically
can.
yeah yeah
Absolutely. But as you mentioned before, the sideboard is where this one has really taken a little bit of a
yes
shift. So the things that are the same: three naturalized, three Tormod's Crypt, two Waterfront Bounces, and we're back to one counterspell, one daze in the board. But as you mentioned before, Hailstorm has now made an appearance. Is this about the time people discovered what survival elves
yes
was?
number one like yeah this was the time when elves started like really like it became like against normal elves without survival I could actually keep up but
Right, right.
with survival holy crap yeah
Yes.
so number one though the idea of hailstorm I used to actually play this card in legacy it was kind of like a niche sideboard
Okay.
card that if you noticed okay no, let's not talk about elves yet if you notice goblins if you noticed, goblins,
Yes.
none of their creatures have bigger than 2 toughness. And let's say they have a king
Correct.
out. You kill the king, everyone else dies too. Yeah.
Yes, they
And
do. It's
goblins
true.
is never a deck that will ever hold back its creatures. When it swings, it will swing with everything. So
Yep.
so this is the perfect card against goblins. Number one, this card along with the 4 blue blasts goes in against goblins. But number two, though, you're right. I didn't. I realized that Madness needed a way to. Elves was just way too fast with survival and an 8 Gaius Cradle effectively. It was just too explosive. I needed a way to stabilize and the best solution I found out I found at this point in time was Hailstorm. Um, so
Hmm.
so that was kind of my solution that I was testing out. And in this tournament, I got first, but I was lucky to have dodged Michael Arnold on elves. I told him straight up during that tournament, yeah, I'm kind of happy that I dodged you, and someone else took you
Absolutely.
down because I was not looking forward to that match.
Absolutely. And nobody really looks forward to that match a lot of the time. And then you mentioned the next big change is Chills finally
Yeah,
left the building. In come blasts because I happen to agree with you in most cases where chill is almost a trap card outside of maybe a stasis deck, and not even in stasis a lot of times is it doesn't. One chill doesn't do enough. Two chill certainly is backbreaking. One chill a lot of times just doesn't do enough. It's not targeted. They play around it. So I think, and it's also more man of effective and flexible. So I think definitely that change for the most part for most blue decks is correct. So we are noticing with this some meta shifts. We've now mentioned that beyond the fair decks, survival elves has now started to appear and become a problem that we have to recognize and adjust to. So as we move on to our next deck, this is from that's the wrong screen. We got this. All right. This is one of my favorites. We are jumping almost a full year ahead because your lists were similar throughout that year. They were pretty similar. This one, um, this one's different. So your creature package essentially the same. We are now up to 4 arrogant worms. We have a waterfront bouncer main. Still the Aquamobia, still the 4 squeeze. We still have our 4 careful studies. We're back up to the 22 lands. No more silly, whatever those things are called. City of Brasses, survivals are there. But we get to the instants. And we're not going to say anything about the sideboard yet. The instants are now 3 dazes, 3 foils, and 3 gushes.
Yes.
So I don't think we can talk about that change though without actually talking about the sideboard. Is that probably fair?
Well, I could try. So this was during the time when Dreadnought was really just making its appearance, and it still is the hot new thing, Dreadnought. And and also like by this time, there was a guy in our league that was really having success. Thursday is God is his name. He was having a lot of success with Stasis, and I realized that like probably around the same time, other people realized that that counterspell like is kind of a weak card if the opponent can resolve like something crazy and that'll lock you or end the game, and can out counter you because they have free counter spells. And I was playing just a game against like F. Paul Lutz, Francisco, and I was playing lots of other games against Paul Master with Stasis. Oh, sorry, with Dreadnought, and there's another guy. There's another guy that plays Dreadnought in our community too. He plays mono blue. I was getting out countered because of those free counters, and I realized that like in order to be competitive, I had to ditch counterspell, and I had to be able to match like those games boil down to one single like against Dreadnought like mainly but we could talk about Oath too and Stasis. Those.
And yeah, because in addition to this in IRL, not sorry to cut in, you've Dreadnought has now come in, Stasis, and I know Thursday without saying his real name is a more local Madison guy. I played against him in the finals of the first Misties, so he's a really good guy. But Stasis is there, and then also Parfait is existing at the same time, which is, as you said, now carries Oath, which has now caused you to adjust.
Like against it's Dreadnought, Oath, and Stasis, like those kinds of decks. As Madness, your game ends up in that one key turn. Like that you have to win the counter war against them. Something has to happen where you will have to win the counter war, and you're not going to win the counter war if they have free counter spells and you don't. So so that was why I realized foils had to go in, and with the foils came the gushes to help
Yes,
out with
absolutely.
the foils. And
Now, how how did that feel with? Because I actually got asked this when I was with the pre-mod cast when I was talking about stasis a little bit ago. Was I think Jared had asked me what is the lowest number of islands you would run in a Gush deck, and I think I said
Mhm.
9, and we all agreed I was crazy. You have 8. So how did that work itself out? How reliable was it at 8 islands to pull off
Well,
sometimes?
keep in mind, this version I only ran 3 gushes, not 4, but
Okay.
it won me the game. um, I
Okay,
still was
fair.
able to gush. This was my finals was against F. Paulette's Stifle Knot, and I did have enough islands to gush and foil and days. So, but yeah, no. Number one, I do agree with you. 9 islands is in my testing so far is probably the minimum to for Gush to be consistent, and especially Gush and foil and days. I think 9 is probably
Hmm.
the limit, and keep because everyone if I had no careful studies, like no way to draw cards, I would need more than 9. But then because I'm running card draw spells, I think 9 is you can get away with 9, and yeah, like against that game against Stifle Knot, if one of my wastelands had been an island, I could have won much easier. Because I had Wonder in the graveyard, I
Hmm.
had Lethal on board, and like I was just held back by his dreadnought. So like he couldn't
Yeah.
swing in, I couldn't swing in. So
Uh
but
huh.
until though, the, literally like the game revolved around me hard casting my Wonder for the win. Um, yeah.
Yep.
So
I've
yeah.
done that
So
before.
but if I didn't, and it was because I didn't have an island. So so
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. To answer your question though, 9 islands I think is a minimum for Gush to work.
Sure. Absolutely. So then we've covered that, and that talking about those instances now leads us
Yeah.
to the sideboard. This sideboard is absolutely nothing like any of the other ones except that it has one
Hmm.
daze in it. Your sideboard now reads one Gilded Drake, one Foil, 4 Vision Charm, 4 Stifle, 4 Dreadnought. You turn yourself into a
Yeah.
Dreadnought deck. How did we get here? How
Yeah.
effective was it? And how many times did opponents disconnect and just sit there for a second and not understand?
Number one, it was very effective against 3 main matchups. Number one, against Sly. I did not miss the blue elemental blast at all against Sly. Sly cannot handle turn 2 Dreadnought. Um, so I was because
Hmm.
one of my matchups in the playoffs was against Sly, and so I was
Hmm.
just really happy. Number two though, against opposing Dreadnought decks, this was so like Dreadnought is a power move. Yeah, like a Dreadnought is one of the most powerful things you could do in this format. This is game. I feel like it's almost game breaking. Like it's like in Vintage there used to be like Tinker, Darksteel, Colossus. I think like this is the
Right.
equivalent of Tinker, Darksteel, Colossus. And it's in a format like pre-modern. Like this is in the same format
Hmm.
where Jacko Pup is played and you're playing turn 2 12 12 trample. Um, so
Yes.
this is a really and I realized like against those decks, I wanted to not just revolve around the counter war. I wanted to see if I could match them power for power. So I was experimenting with my own. I'm like, well, I'm just gonna have my own dreadnought package then, and then like I bet I could get away with it because and
Hmm.
and I could get away with it. Survival tutors for dreadnought. Um, I could run the counter. I could run the same counter package as they do, and I run wastelands and stifle and days. So I could play that game too. Furthering the tempo concept, I could play that game. So yeah, and so
Okay.
with this build though, my win rate against Not really was good. I was winning against mono blue blue red. I never played against blue black, but blue white I won. I was winning against that too. Um, this build
Okay.
really was good against mono blue or against dreadnought and against oath decks as well and against basically any deck that doesn't want to go the long game, that wants to explode out.
Mm-hmm.
Against decks like the Rock, or against decks that, or like Mud or Landstill, the Dreadnought pack don't do the Dreadnought package. Um, and against
Okay.
decks like Goblins, you could do it, but um, but make sure you're on the play when you do it, and or else you have to
Sure.
be on Madness against Goblins still, because they have they go too wide, too big for Dreadnought. But at least, well, at least for this build of Dreadnought, if you were running another build of Dreadnought, probably it's better. But then against like my build, I realized Goblins is like 50-50 depending on where. But against another problematic matchup, though, we're going back Elves. Um, I was testing a way to see if I could just kind of ignore Elves and kind of just do turn two Dreadnought against Elves. Like, because keep it, ever
Mm-hmm.
since Elves, I've been, all my builds were kind of trying to figure out what to do against elves. If it wasn't for elves, I wouldn't have that big of a headache. Like this literally, like this was against not, but primarily actually was me trying to find a solution against elves. So yeah, and
Right. And elves is, to get on a small tangent, is a very, it can almost play all three types of game. It can be an aggro deck, a very fast aggro deck. Then it can transition to a combo deck relatively quickly. But also, in the way that its sideboarding packaging works and with survival, they can also turn themselves into a pretty good control deck in which they are using Tangle Wires and Naturalizes and Druid Lyrists to really just, hell, even I've seen things with
yeah,
Winter Orbs, like just really play
yeah,
havoc with you. It is such, every creature in that thing has a purpose that explodes you faster and makes other things that your opponents do irrelevant.
yeah,
Like it's a thing that every deck has to do. I think Aaron Dix had put up a something on Facebook where it was like a checklist. Can you beat? Do you have a plan for red? Do you have a plan for elves? Can you beat a
mhm,
12-12? If none of these work,
yeah,
start over for
yeah,
brews. And elves is one that I don't know. It's almost like you have to dedicate the spots to beat it, or you just have to say, well, if I play elves, whatever. I guess I'm
yeah.
losing.
Yeah,
Like,
like okay, so like before this, I keep track of my win rate. My win rate against elves without any like dreadnoughts was like 20%. Yeah,
that
and
sounds
like no,
about right.
but I was talking to elf players and like, what, 20%? That seems kind of high. Like
they're just stomping on your number like that's
yeah,
wrong.
no,
You're
no, no.
lucky.
Like they were like, wow, they were complimenting me. Like, wow, like I've never lost against, I've never lost against Madness. Like to them, like their win rate against Madness decks was 100%, and I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, okay, like so, yeah, so, so you, against elves, with this build, my plan was to side in the Dreadnought package and mulligan until I get it. Like I don't begin games without turn two Dreadnought. Um, that was kind of my game plan. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I could see that, and they they can't deal with. You see, the crazy thing is they
they
sometimes they
can deal with
can,
it.
which is
They
so
can deal.
stupid. Like sometimes they
Yeah,
have naturalize. A lot of them are now. I see crumbles in sideboards, which makes me very sad as a dreadnought player
yeah,
sometimes. And then like sometimes they just like, I guess I'm gonna do dumb things with mana and just vigilante and get you too. Like they just sometimes have that much mana, or they'll Kamal on turn 3
yeah,
somehow, and it's just
yeah,
stupid. So elves. What are you gonna do? What are you really
Yeah.
gonna do? So Gilded Drake, the other kind of the one not part of the package was. I am assuming that is a extra response to the Dreadnought matchup in general.
Dreadnought and Oath. Yeah. Well, like Oath. Like, yeah.
Dreadnought
Not
and
Parfait Oath,
Yeah, yeah.
but more like Nishoba Oath.
Like tradition, like junk oaths and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah, like
Traditional oath.
any
Gotcha.
deck that wants to explode into big, huge guys, or but actually, yeah, Gilded Drake was for. I mean, initially, in my initial brainstorm of this build, I had one Gilded Drake on the side for like Reanimator and Oath, but then that came out, but now it's back in, especially with Dreadnought. It funny enough, we're skipping ahead, but like in like the there was a in-person tournament before this at Collectors Legion in LA, and I top eighted that tournament too. My first, no, it was not my first, but one of my, like it was like a 33-man tournament, and it was, yeah, and
Yep.
one of my matches was against a blue-black Knot in real life, and I won with the Gilded Drake. So yeah.
Right.
And I remember back in Extended and Legacy, there was a mini combo with Gilded Drake and Bouncer, where you could Drake lock them kind of by playing the Drake, bouncing it, playing the Drake again. Like survival trade win, like trade win Rider wants to do that, and
Right.
I realized that like that's another package for Madness. I wasn't sure if I would able to really take full advantage of that because I don't run a lot of land, but I quickly realized that against like my matches against Stifle Knot with meddling mages that it was really relevant.
Yep.
If I could get the Drake lock on them, it was game over. Yeah, I was stealing their
Absolutely.
mages. I was stealing. Yeah, if I ever steal a Dreadnought too, it's game over. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So you continued on your successes. You mentioned Collectors Legion, a big tournament out there, kind of with this package in varying degrees. And it seemed to improve some of those matchups you were worried about. The surprise factor also doesn't hurt. So then the last deck we're going to look into is the most recent one I found. Again, a distinct change. And I'm going to ask you a question when we pull
Yes.
it up. So this is from the most recent championship. Now, for people who are not familiar, the MOS has is it bi-weekly? Is it bi-weekly tournaments now, and then it leads into like a championship of some sort?
Okay, so the Magic Online Society, our leagues run every 2 weeks. So so basically every 2 weeks we have a league, and there's 5 matches in the league, and so that's that. We've been having we've really grown from like a league of 7 to a league of 44. So
Absolutely. This
yeah,
has been
we've really
great to
grown,
see.
but like so every 2 leagues, simultaneously every 2 weeks we have a thing called the playoffs, and what that is we take the top 16 players from the last 2 leagues. So which means like let's say like the past 2 leagues there were 44 players each. That's 88 players total. But then obviously like there's duplicates. So the top 16 players in those 2 leagues get to participate in a single elimination tournament called the playoffs, and every 5 leagues. By the way, sorry. For every win you get in a normal league and in the playoffs, you get points. You get ladder points. All right. So every 5 leagues, we have something called the seasonal championship. It's essentially a ladder championship. The top 8 players of the whole season gets to play in a single elimination tournament, and with really good prizes. Like this is akin to like a Magic Online challenge level, and so yeah, so
Okay.
so
Awesome.
the structure of our format is to kind of reward participation and reward skill at the same time. So you know, the playoffs are there to reward skill by like and participation by saying like, hey, the best players get to play and earn a little bit more points, but you're not totally screwed if you have a bad league. That's why it takes the top 16 out of the last two leagues, and the championships is there to award both skill and participation.
Absolutely. Now, and I asked that leading into this because the next deck list we're going to take is another
Yes.
diverging list. Are the championships, are they open lists? Do people know what people are
No.
playing ahead of
Um.
time? Okay, so there is no open information. You may know the player and what they may play, but it's not like you see the deck
No.
list ahead
No.
of
Like.
time.
Yeah. Well,
Okay,
they have to submit it, but then yeah, we don't see it until like after the tournament's over.
gotcha. So you don't know upfront
Uh.
information,
No.
obviously. So okay, so the reason I say that is because this is a very different list from what you were playing
Yeah.
up until this point. Um, so let's start with the main deck. This is from February,
Yeah.
just this month in the Premodern
Yeah.
Season 5 Championships. Uh, the creature package is relatively the same, except we have dropped the main deck Genesis. In fact, we have
Yeah.
dropped it from the list. We have added there's a Waterfront Bouncer and a Gilded Drake
Yes.
main. Now Genesis, did is that just a card? And every time I play with it, it feels like it should be an amazing card, and in some cases it is. But does it always just sometimes feel slow, clunky, and just doesn't get there when you need it to?
Um.
What was the reasoning for dropping the Genesis?
Number one, let's talk about the pros of Genesis. The Genesis is good against any single deck that wants to go one for one with you. Like, I'm talking about Landstill,
Yes.
the Rock, um, the Solution, or Patriot. I don't know what to call that deck. Yeah,
It's all
and like
right.
every single mid-range deck in existence that wants to trade one for one and stabilize, or or one for one and control the board, um, or even board wipe you. Genesis is real will be the will be like will be the card that will allow you as an aggro control deck or a tempo deck to outgrind the decks whose sole purpose in life is to outgrind everyone else. That's the main reason for Genesis. It is slow and ineffective against decks like Sly, Goblins, Elves, or Dreadnought, or Parfait, or like any deck that doesn't try to go one for one with you, or goes like blazingly fast and explodes out where Genesis is a non-factor. So I think
Absolutely.
so. Dropping Genesis was a painful, an unfortunate decision, but it had to be done. I think the meta has evolved where people are finding better decks, and those better decks are called Dreadnought,
Right.
Survival Elves, Oath, or Parfait. I mean, and yeah, you lose power against Landstill and against the Rock, but I think against the Rock, I still have a very Survival Madness has a very good matchup, in my opinion, versus the
Hmm.
Rock. Without Genesis. So I mean, with Genesis, it's so I mean, I have like peace of mind, but without Genesis,
Hmm.
I think I can still pull it off most of the time with a little bit of brain power. Same thing with Landstill. Um, like without
Okay.
Genesis, I could still pull in. It'll be harder. I I I lose it more. I miss it more so against Landstill, but it is what it is. I had to make room for against decks like Dreadnought and any Oath deck out there.
Absolutely, that makes sense. So as we move into our instance, it has become a kind of a collage of different ideas. So you're still on two frantic searches. You're down to two gushes. You're at four dazes and
Yeah.
four foils. And I will mention with these changes, you are in your lands, even though you're still at 21 lands, you are now at
Yes.
9 islands. So we are at that barely squeaking by
Yes.
point. And it seems to me like, as you've noticed, the meta, at least over the time that I've played, and I think this meta will always shift. If something comes up, it'll shift and it'll kind of ebb and flow. But we are at a point where if you are being on a serious level and you're saying you're wanting to win an event, I think you cannot take any opportunities to dirtle. Like, you cannot dirtle much. And Genesis is a great card in the matchups. You said 1-for-1s, but the meta isn't a 1-for-1 meta. It's not a dirtle trade meta. It's hit you with a punch, hit you with the punch, hit you with the punch. And every card almost has to be a punch. There's no feints. There's no fakes. It's deal with this now. And that's what I feel like this instant package is. Every one of these is a punch. Every one of these is pushing something unfair, whether it's I get to play. All of these are free spells, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, you're not actually expending resources. You could float 2 and gush and play your land for the turn. You're not really down thing. You're untapping with Frantic Search. Like, they're not taxing you resource wise, which is amazing. Is that kind of how you felt as you put this together? These are the best spells at what they do to push me forward.
Yes, exactly that. Number one, it goes back to like what we just talked about. Survival Madness needs to be able to win those counter wars against Dreadnought, Stasis, Oath. It needs those matchups. Even Landstill with like if you have to fight over Standstill or Humility. Like it revolves around the counter war, like that one key spell, that one key turn that can either blow you out or if you prevent it from happening or you deal with it, you will win. You have inevitability once you deal with that spell. I went up to 4 foils because number one, Madness actually could take advantage of foil. Discard your Squee, discard your Basking Rootwalla. I've even discarded an Arrogant Worm and paid for it. Like foil, it becomes actually close to a force of will. And that was another attraction. I was like, remember, like I'm playing like a fair Survival Madness is a fair deck, but I'm trying to make it as unfair of a fair deck. Yeah,
unfair as possible.
Whether it was trying to turn my Wild Mongrels into Tarmogoyfs, turning my Careful Studies into Thoughtcasts, or turning my foils into Force of Wills. I'm trying my best to do that, and because I know that if I can do that, I am potentially it's kind of like how you can punch below your weight. If you can kind of like reach that power, you can punch like below your weight. That's kind of and you're right. Everything here is a response to those decks that force you to have to do something that turn, like because they're gonna gush.
Yes.
They're gonna foil. They're gonna daze. Yeah.
Yep.
So 100%.
So as a result of this, your mana base has kind of changed. We're at 21 lands again. We're up to 9 islands. We're only down to 2 actual forests, 3 Yavimaya coasts, 2 wastelands, and the biggest change, and we'll get to this as we jump into the sideboard, is you've added red. So you have some wooded foothills in there, and we'll talk about the sideboard now. Our sideboard is now the package is gone. Yeah. Dreadnought has gone back to wherever he hides during the day. We're on 4 Hydroblast, 4 Pyrokinesis. That's one we're going to talk about. 3 Naturalized, 2 Firestorms, 1 Mountain, 1 Reverent Silence. And again, as I look at this sideboard, it is, again, punches. Naturalize is the most expensive thing you're truly doing in this sideboard. Hydroblast, 1 mana. Efficient. Pyrokinesis. I can't imagine your imagination never saying, I'm casting this for 6. I can't imagine.
Possible.
Yeah, theoretically, sure, but
Yeah.
let's not do that. Firestorm, an amazingly effective card with the madness
Yeah.
mechanic. One mountain to fix up the base as you go, and then a card that I absolutely love. I love these series of cards.
Yeah.
Reverent Silence. For those that don't know it, why don't you explain what? That's probably the one card, then followed by Firestorm, that people are probably not as
Yeah.
familiar
Reverent
with.
Silence is a sorcery that reads, if you have a forest, you can have the opponent gain 6 life, and without you can cast this without paying its mana cost, and it reads destroy all enchantments.
Yes, and for anyone in the meta, enchantments are king. Like I don't know how many times we've ever seen in various metas where the enchantment, certainly not in recent memory. Well, maybe that fabled Mirror Breaker card. I don't know, whatever they're playing now. But like enchantments are a key thing in this format. The big one of the big decks, Parfait, runs a lot on enchantments. Some of the most annoying things are enchantments, and the ability to have them have to fight over a couple other things and then freely destroy all their enchantments is a killer, just like Abolish is a killer. Just like Snuff Out can be a killer. Anytime you can trade other resources that isn't mana
Yeah.
is a killer because it lets you do other things. So I love that inclusion. What made you choose? Was it the free aspect that made you choose that over, say, Tranquil Domain, which is a instant
Yeah.
at 2 mana that does the same
Yeah,
thing?
it's exactly that. It's the free aspect. A deck like Goblins, it has to run Tranquil Domain because it doesn't run enough forests. I feel that I can get away with that as Madness. That's number one. Number two, it's free, and that's the main reason. Um, um,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I do. Getting 6 life does suck, but it we're not like Survival Madness isn't like an aggro deck. It's a tempo deck or like an aggro control deck if you don't like that term. It Having them gain 6 life sucks, but it's it's fine. You can play through that. The whole point is to stop them and stop them. And if you can pay 0 mana for it, you can do other things on your turn. Um, you can play this when you're tapped out. Like this is a card that I keep because we're running 21 lands and 2 of them are wastelands. Um, this is a card that if you can that you have to have, I think, in today's meta. I was thinking primarily of several decks. Parfait is one. Enchantress is actually I found it to be pretty hard. Um, they have like stuff like Sterling Grove, like giving all their enchantment shroud. Um, this takes care of that. Stasis, lands are tapped out. Um, Reverent Silence.
Mm-hmm.
Like um, it's not, and against elves, this is good too. Like destroying survival of the fittest. Like this is if I could, I would run more Reverent Silences because I think this is people. I don't know if people have forgotten about this card, but I used to play this card in Legacy. Legacy, I had access to Tropical Island, but this card, I think, once I realized I needed a mass enchantment removal to alongside Naturalize, Reverent Silence rather than Tranquil Domain was the first card that came to mind.
That makes sense. And now talk to me a little bit about Firestorm
Yeah,
and Pyrokinesis. Is this the
yeah,
next attempt at taking on the elf decks? And I say that because there is a slight, maybe a slight, there is a difference between Magic Online meta and IRL and even webcam meta. Um, Nothing bad, but because of a couple of things, some bugs, so you can't play things
Breakfast.
like breakfast or anything like that. You're losing some decks. Some decks are like I can't imagine playing like Turtle Splash on Magic Online effectively. Like there's just so many clicks, things like that. People don't play those, and because it's a smaller community, is homogenized the right word? It gets very, or inbred isn't the word, but you'll see strategies come, you'll know the players, you know what's going. So automatically you're saying, okay, I'm flexing because I know this is probably happening. You mentioned Thursday. For a long time, he was on stasis. People knew we flex, and that's something when I had talked to him, he's like, "Man, everybody's ready for stasis now." So it's not as wide of a field. So it becomes a little different than a bigger meta. And within the Magic Online field, there's an elf. There's a couple of them, but one of the main elf players is a gentleman named Ali Rad. Uh, uh, Decent Magic player, you know.
Former pro.
He's got some
Former pro.
accolades.
Sylvan,
Yeah, former pro,
Sylvan
Hall of Famer.
Safekeeper himself.
Sylvan
Yeah.
Safekeeper. They know nothing to sneeze at, but when you're facing opponents like that and you kind of know what's going on, and is that informing some of your choices, how you're building this? Like, would you take this to, say you came out to another event out at
Yeah.
the local LGS? Is this probably the version you're bringing, or is this more built because you generally
Okay.
know what's going on?
To answer that question, no. I build my decks as if it was going towards a general meta. That's number one. Yeah, and number
Okay,
two
awesome.
is, yeah, it is true that on Magic Online, if you see I mean, like, it's gone to the point where, like, I'm like, people are playing me turn one, and, like, they're turn one blind cabal therapying me for survival of the fittest. It's like, okay. I'm just like, dude.
Yeah, they know.
Like, but then I accept that, okay, because I made the conscious choice of playing Madness every single time and never playing any other deck. Fine.
Right,
But
absolutely.
but to answer your question though, yeah, Olive Red always plays Elves. I always play Madness. But you have guys like Paul Master who has made it his mission to switch up every single league. Like every single deck he plays on the league and the playoffs are different. He always plays Parfait Oath in the champs, in the season champs, because that's when he really will try hard. But I mean, not that he's not trying hard, but like, that's when he brings his best.
There's something behind that he feels is worthwhile to put his best foot forward and
Exactly.
probably the best
And,
deck.
but other players though, many players switch it up. On Magic Online.
Okay.
So even though you're right. Everyone has their main deck, and when you see that, so for example, Thursday, he's usually on some sort of prison deck. It went from Stasis to like
Yes.
Prison Oath to like now he's on Mud.
on Mud.
Yeah,
essentially.
which funny enough, we played during the season champs, and this is the list I beat him with. But yeah,
Aw.
but yeah, like yeah, but he's a great player. He's beat me several times too. But I just but anyway, but my point is being that like yeah, you're right. There are some people who always jams the same deck, but on Magic Online, the meta does vary. You see different kinds of decks out there. Die Shuffler is another player that's very active and good. He's gone from Survival Tradewind to the Rock to Survival Madness, and every time he's played Survival Madness, he's done better than I did. I mean, we had the same results. We had better breakers, and like yeah. So
Sure.
and I told him, I messaged him like, hey, like like your best results have all come from Survival Madness, just FYI. And like, yeah, no,
Absolutely.
but yeah, he, there's people who switch it up, and there's always new players that come in. Yeah, so it's not Magic Online is still not a place where you should not be prepared for a general meta. Like there'll be players on Sly, there'll be players on the Rock, there'll be players on Goblins. Like you should still prepare for a general meta on Magic Online, especially at this point, when our leagues are hitting like 30 to 44 players. Yeah, you should definitely prepare for a general meta. And yes, this is the list that I would bring. This is the list I'm playing on the webcam right now, like on the monthlies right now. And the reason, yeah.
Okay.
So this is the list that I think I would take to a general meta, which I am taking to a general meta.
Absolutely. So tell me then, let's dive into it.
Yeah.
Pyrokinesis. Obviously a powerful spell against small creatures. The free part requiring you to cast or to exile another red spell. And by count within here, you only have 6 red spells. So it's not a plethora after sideboard. How often were you struggling to find that second red card
Well,
to cast?
I actually have 10. You forget to count. Yeah, you forget to
Do
count
you?
for squeeze.
Oh, you
Yeah.
have the squeeze. Squeeze
Yeah,
important.
squeeze
I keep
very
forgetting he's a good
important.
squee man.
So
Okay, I'm an idiot. That's
well,
all
no,
right.
well,
We'll let
so
that be.
I have 10 red spells. Number 2, survival tutors for the squee, and
Yes, it does.
funny enough,
See, this is why I play stasis. I just play a turn like a 2-mana enchantment. I just sit there and tap things, and it's
Exactly.
fine. I don't have to think about it. That
yeah,
much.
no, like so okay, the reason why the Dreadnought package had to go was because I found I was losing way too much. I mean, I was losing way too much power against decks like Enchantress, decks like Goblins, and it was barely helping against Elves. I was still like, I went from 20% to like 40%, like a little bit under 35, because I was like mulling until I got the combo, and that was my whole strategy. Um, for a while I ran like 3 Cursed Totem, but then I had to go to 3 Naturalize because I decks like Enchantress were just kicking my butt without them. But like, yeah, no, I was that Dreadnought package, while being very good against the Dreadnought Mirror, was costing me too much against other decks like Goblins, especially, and I was like thinking like what to do. 4 Hydroblasts had to come back in. I needed 4 naturalized effects, which is the 3 naturalized and 1 reverent silence. And we talked about the reverent silence, but I needed like, so it came back to, well, so the elf problem. Like, I needed a way to do anything about elves, and like so the solution that I'm trying now, that so far, knock on wood, has been successful. There's another elf player in my pod that I have yet to face, but so far, in the playtest matchup, I tested this against Ale, and in the playtest matchup, I won for the it was my only win against Ale ever. And I won. I mean, yeah. Like, he moved to like 5 on game 3, which contributed to me winning. But usually, before Pyrokinesis and Firestorm, elves mulling to 5, they would still kick my butt. Like, yeah,
Right.
like mulling to 5 does not
Absolutely.
means nothing. Like, versus, so the I I've never, so far I'm 2-0 against elves. I've won yesterday. I played a monthly match against a guy. He goes by Dbach on Magic Online, but I played him in for the webcam. So I played him as his real name, and yeah, we were playing, and after the games we talked, he remarked, yeah, like, this is my first time losing against Madness as elves.
Yeah, it feels kind
No,
of bad.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
if I were an elf player, I would feel kind of bad if I had to lose against Madness. There was another Madness guy. This is before I added Pyroblasts, and sorry, Pyrokinesis, and I played him as Madness, and he was one of the 20. Remember, I said 20%. He was with the 20%, and and yeah, he felt really. I could tell he felt really bad when he lost against me. Um, yeah, it was like, I told him, hey, I have a 20% win rate against elves, and he just happened to.
I'm sure that didn't help much.
Yeah, no, it didn't help much, but but he knew that, like, this was supposed to be like one of the easiest matchups. But yeah, no, but my point is, all my efforts, all Survival Madness, I think the deck that keeps Survival Madness from breaking. People always say, oh, the mana base is bad, or it's too fair of a deck, and that's why it can't be tier 1. I think the existence of elves is actually what keeps Survival Madness from being tier 1. Like, if you can't just fold to another tier 1 deck, and expect to be tier 1. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm hoping that this is the solution. So yeah, this is my current
Absolutely.
iteration.
Is Absolutely. And when I was thinking about it, and the Firestorm, to touch briefly on it, much the same as Pyrokinesis, except you're discarding cards with it to deal X damage to
Yeah,
creatures and players. So Firestorm is a madness outlet for your arrogant worms,
squeeze.
etc.
Okay.
So, yep, absolutely. So the red is there as you're fighting mostly
Yeah,
against elves. Um, and that seems like a logical conclusion to me on how to do it. Um, so that's kind of the last deck we were covering on kind of our historical arc here. And I think you did an excellent job explaining the choices, like seeing this evolution. If you look at this list and the first list, it's insane to see the differences in
yeah,
how it got there. So, and before we go, I want to run into a couple of
sure.
questions for you regarding Madness. So, best
Mm.
matchup for Madness.
Easy. Any deck that wants you to discard Dead Guy Ale is and like any mono black deck that wants you to discard spells like that runs like Funeral Charm. Dead Guy Ale, it runs cards like Gerard's Verdict. Those are like I think someone mentioned like um, Mike, was it Michael Arnold? He said like Madness is the natural predator of Dead Guy L. I have never lost a match against Dead Guy L. Like it's like how elves use Madness. Like I view Dead Guy L
Mm-hmm.
as like all right, I'm gonna I'm gonna do some stomping because number one they're running enemy colors. Wasteland will screw them over. Number two, they're running like cards like Gerard's Verdict and Hypnotic Spectre. Great. My guys are bigger, and you help me discard, or either you help me when when you cast Gerard's Verdict, or it makes no difference as I discard my squeeze. So yeah, so
Absolutely.
those kinds of decks easily. I want to play against those kinds of decks. If I was like trying hard, I want like all everyone in my pod to be Dead Guy Ale.
Fair
Yeah,
enough, fair enough. And so I know we're not going to say worst matchup because I think we've established that's
yeah.
elves at this point. Matchup that you think should be good, but for whatever reason is just you can't quite get it there yet. It should in theory be good, but for whatever reason it still keeps getting you. What's one of those matchups that's just like I'm almost there.
It
What
would be
is it?
any deck with Oath. I think
Okay.
right now, I would say any deck with Oath is around 40-60 their favor. Um, because,
Okay.
um, and I'm trying my best to get there. I have main deck Drake, Waterfront Bouncer. It's just that, Oath, it's kind of like the Madness Dead Guy Ale problem where part of me winning is me playing my guys, and they literally want me to do
Hmm.
just that. And so, yeah, and so
Absolutely.
against those decks, the the game revolves around that one spell. Can I keep Oath of Druids from resolving? So yeah, like let's talk about Prison Oath. Like one of my matchups against Thursday. Yeah, that's exactly how I lost was because I couldn't keep him from resolving Oath. Every time I prevented Oath, I deal with the mainland manlands easy. Um, there's another guy,
Hmm.
TV Tyrant. He runs this thing called Terravore Oath, and I love that deck.
Yep, I've
Yeah,
seen him do it.
I love that deck. He mixes green land destruction with man lands with Sphere of Resistance. It's like mono green Prison Oath, except without the removal, which
Hmm.
actually kind of makes it. Not, I mean, in my opinion, not as good as Prison Oath because of the lack of swords. But that being said, it's still similar strategy, except he has the added benefit of being able to hard cast a Terravore for insane damage without Oath. But like, I usually have won against him, but lately, like, I would still put it at 40-60, because um, despite the main deck Drake and the Bouncer, despite having being able to card advantage away, um, it's still like the power of Oath is just overwhelming. Like anytime an Oath resolves, I know my chat. If I don't have a naturalize or if I can't deal with it with Bouncer or Drake, I know my chances of winning is pretty low. You know, so
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. And then last question before we get to the end here. Common spell within Madness,
yeah.
Circular Logic. Too underpowered, not good enough. Where are we at with that card? Because that's one of the cards that always seems to be in initial builds of anything
Yeah.
discardy Madness
Yeah.
in Tog, and then once you get to the end of testing and putting things together, it's typically
So,
not there anymore.
yeah, no, I know that several pre-modern players, including my good friend, Pietro, he puts his innovation with Madness is putting circular logic. I've seen a lot of Europeans do that. I dis I heavily disagree, and here's why. Circular Logic is a Type 2 card, or was a block card, block constructed card. It's not good enough for pre-modern. Number one, it's too inflexible. Like, think about this. You need a discard outlet in play. Like, you're not careful studying into Circular Logic. You're like discarding Circular Logic to like Frantic Surge to Wild Mongrel, or if you run Aquamoeba to Aquamoeba. And so that's already like the case. You need it. You need a discard outlet on the table for it to work. Number two, you need a graveyard for it to work. You're not running You're not running a lot of fetch lands. You're not. I mean, yeah, you are filling your graveyard, but you're filling your graveyard with stuff that wants to come back to your hand, like Squee. If you're filling your graveyard if you're discarding 2 cards to Frantic Search, that's disadvantageous, even if they're just lands. So again, you need a discard outlet on the table. You need a graveyard, and you're not really geared as a graveyard deck. You're not playing Brainstorm. You're not like thresholding away. Number three, actually, if you were to run Circular Logic, you should run Double Blue Counterspell because even with a discard outlet on the table, the earliest turn that it's active on is turn 3. It's active turn 3 no matter either way. Um, if you hard cast it, it's a 3 casting cost spell, or you have to cast a Wild Mongrel or Aquamoeba on turn 2, and then have it active on turn 3. Counterspell is active on turn 2 already, and it's non-situational. It'll always counter, and yeah. So those are the reasons why Circular Logic is not a card that I think is optimal in this game, in this format. Um, Block Constructed had to run it because they had no choice. Type 2 had to run it because they had no choice. But then once you go towards like Extended was still running it, but once you go to Legacy, like they're not really running Logic anymore. They're running Force of Will. I mean, not Force of Will, but they're running better counter spells. Like Circular Logic isn't a good card right now, and it might work in like Psychotog. I think it might actually be a better card in Psychotog than in Madness. Yeah.
All right. Well, why don't we end this here, Cyberpunker? Go ahead, give me a little bit of shout out. Shout out yourself, things you're doing, any events you know that are coming up, the MOS.
Yeah,
Let's
well,
hear what you got.
shouts out to the team and the players, obviously on the Magic Online Society. I think we're growing, and all the admins and mods put in great work, and all the players are great. And I mean, shout out to everyone in the pre-modern Discord too. Like everyone's been great to talk with. You know, someone mentioned I think that is probably one of the healthiest communities in Magic. We're not like there's no like immature kids running around, and like there's like even if people have egos, they keep it in check. It's not. It's great to interact with. Shout out to like people who run the webcam tournaments too. Like they're great. It's I have yet to meet a pre-modern player that I disliked, and and whoever's in California, or on the West Coast, Collectors Legion, February 25th is hosting another 1K, so it'll be big, and yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Awesome, man. Well, Cyberpunker, thank you so much for being with me today on my first episode. One thing I'll say is to anyone who listens, if you think of a cool name, things we can trademark, you're smarter than me, let me know. Otherwise, I swear to God, I'm putting this thing up as the question mark podcast because I don't got the brain power. But it was a pleasure, Cyberpunker. I want you to have a wonderful night. We'll be back with more pre-modern podcasts as this is my passion in Magic right now. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, night, wherever you happen to be, and we will talk to you soon. Cyberpunker, again, thank you for being with us.
You're awesome.
Awesome, man. Everyone, take care and have a